"Get out of here." The command tore through the marble hall like a crack of thunder. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't disguised. It was spat, sharp and public, meant to strip dignity bare. And then came the strike. An open palm, swift and unyielding, across the face of a black woman who stood centered beneath the chandeliers. The sound echoed louder than the violins had seconds earlier. Gasps surged through the gala crowd. A woman in yellow dropped her champagne flute. A young man clutched his phone higher, muttering, "No one's going to believe this unless they see it." At the center of it all, the black woman in a sleek gown did not move. Her chin rose fractionally, her arms folded tighter. Not a word, not a flinch. Her silence carried more weight than any protest could. The matriarch who had struck her silver hair, diamonds catching the light, wasn't done. She leaned forward, breath hot with contempt, and hissed again. "This family doesn't negotiate with people like you." The room convulsed. Whispers multiplied. Did she just hit her? Why isn't security moving? She shouldn't even be here. But the woman in black remained rooted, as if the marble floor itself refused to release her. And before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her name was still a mystery to most in the room. But her presence was unforgettable. Tonight she hadn't come with an entourage or a press crew. No flashy jewels, no armor of brand names, just a slim clutch in her hand and a billion-dollar deal resting on her shoulders. And yet none of that mattered. Because all this family saw was someone they thought didn't belong. "Security, escort her out." One of the heirs barked from behind the matriarch. "She doesn't belong at this table," another sneered. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some guests angled their phones for a better shot. Others lowered their eyes, pretending to study the statues that lined the hall. Still she stood, silent. She had seen this before. At 24, when her first commission was withheld because paperwork didn't look right. At 30, when investors laughed at her proposal until another man repeated it word for word. And now, decades later, with power exceeding theirs, the same gesture replayed itself. A hand raised to erase her, a voice commanding her to vanish. But she would not vanish. Her stillness wasn't surrender. It was defiance. And it was the start of a reckoning that no one in that hall had expected. The woman who stood in silence had a name, though the crowd didn't know it yet. Her name was Elena Brooks, 45 years old, CEO of Brooks Global Holdings, architect of mergers that shaped industries, builder of a portfolio that stretched across 3 continents. Tonight, she hadn't come to be celebrated. She had come to test. That's why she wore a simple gown, black silk without embellishment. That's why she entered without a press team, without a glittering entourage, without the kind of armor this family expected. She carried only a slim clutch, a phone, and the weight of a billion-dollar contract that she had drafted herself. But to the Rosenbergs, the billionaire family hosting the gala, her appearance was enough to erase all of that. From the far side of the hall, their eldest son adjusted his bow tie and barked to a nearby usher. "Escort her out, now." Another cousin smirked and added, "She's not on the guest list. She doesn't belong here." The usher hesitated. His eyes darted between Elena and the family that signed his checks. Around him, guests shifted, uneasy, waiting to see how far this humiliation would go. Elena stayed still, eyes steady. Not a single word left her mouth. It wasn't weakness, it was patience, and patience had carried her through decades of rooms like this. She remembered 24 walking into a bank with her first real estate commission, only to be told the deposit looked suspicious. She remembered 30 standing in a boardroom where her proposal was ignored until a junior associate repeated her words. She remembered 40 hosting a conference in a hotel she owned, yet being mistaken for the staff. Every insult, every doubt, every erasure had built the steel she stood on now. The murmurs in the hall thickened. She shouldn't even be here. Who let her in? Was that contract even real? And then came the laughter. Sharp, cruel. A young man in a navy tuxedo raised his glass and sneered loud enough for the cameras to catch it. Imagine thinking she could manage $1 billion. The insult landed heavy. A few guests chuckled nervously. Others looked away. But the cameras were still rolling. Phones glowed red across the room, live streams spreading what no press release could contain. Elena's silence held. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't plead her case. She stood, folded arms and lifted chin, as though the marble beneath her heels had claimed her as its anchor. And that silence, in a hall trained to measure power by noise and arrogance, was unbearable. The matriarch of the Rosenberg family, the same woman who had struck her, turned to the crowd and declared, "This contract is finished. Torn. Invalid. There will be no partnership with frauds." Gasps. More phones raised. Still, Elena did not move. She didn't need to, because she knew what they didn't. Every word, every insult, every hand raised against her tonight was being logged, tracked, and prepared to turn back on them. The billion-dollar deal wasn't ending. It was about to shift, and the reckoning they thought they had delivered was only beginning. The tension inside the hall thickened like smoke. Whispers turned into open commentary, phones angled higher, every second feeding the spectacle. Then came the escalation. From the back of the room, a floor manager in a dark suit hustled forward. His badge glinted under the chandeliers. He bowed quickly to the Rosenbergs before facing Elena. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Elena didn't move. The manager's tone sharpened. "This is a private event. You're trespassing. Refusal to comply will result in removal by security." Gasps rippled again. The words were cold, clinical, dressed as protocol, but every guest knew what they really were. At the edge of the crowd, a young journalist whispered into her phone's mic. "This is escalating fast. They just threatened her with removal." The Rosenberg heir smirked, sipping his champagne. "Call security. Let's put an end to this farce." Two guards appeared from the side doors, uniforms pressed, eyes already set on Elena. They moved slowly, deliberately, each step punctuating the humiliation. Still, she stood. Still, she was silent. The matriarch's voice sliced the air again. "You see? Not even supposed to be here. This is what happens when we let outsiders in." A murmur rose, some guests nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones captured every angle. Near the back, a young woman in a silver dress whispered to her friend, "That's not right. I saw her name on the seating chart." Her friend pulled her arm. "Shh, don't get involved." But the words had been said, and they lingered in the air. The guards drew closer. One reached for his radio. The floor manager squared his shoulders, ready to give the order. And yet, Elena's expression never cracked. Her arms remained folded, her gaze steady, as though every insult, every threat, every attempt to erase her was nothing but background noise. The silence unsettled them more than shouting ever could. One guest, still live streaming, whispered into his camera, "She hasn't said a single word, and somehow she's the one in control." The guards stopped just a few feet away, waiting for the final command. The Rosenbergs stood tall, convinced their dominance was absolute. But what they didn't realize was that the balance of power in that room had already shifted. The crowd wasn't only watching anymore. They were witnessing. They were remembering. And soon, they would be choosing sides. The guards loomed closer, their shadows stretching across the marble like storm clouds. The crowd braced for a scene, the kind where power ends with someone dragged through the doors. But Elena Brooks didn't budge. Instead, she slipped one hand into her clutch and pulled out her phone. No rush, no panic, just deliberate calm. The floor manager stepped forward, voice sharp. "Ma'am, put that away. You're not allowed to record here." Elena's thumb tapped once. A call connected instantly. Her voice, steady low. "Initiate protocol. Document everything." On the other end, hundreds of miles away, her executive assistant's voice came crisp and precise. "Understood. Timestamp started. Systems are logging in real time." The manager faltered. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Guests leaned in, phones lifted higher. They didn't know what protocol meant, but they felt the weight of it. The matriarch sneered, mistaking calm for bluff. "Recording won't save you. You're finished here." But Elena wasn't recording. She was triggering an internal process, one designed for exactly this kind of moment. At the far end of the hall, a young journalist whispered to her mic. "She just called someone. This is bigger than it looks." The Rosenberg heir scoffed. "Enough. Remove her." One guard reached forward, hand hovering near Elena's arm. That's when her voice cut the silence quiet, but so sharp it froze him mid-step. "Think very carefully before you touch me." The guard hesitated. It wasn't the volume of her words. It was the certainty. The matriarch slammed her palm against the podium. "Do it now." But the hesitation had already cracked their authority. The live stream cameras caught it all, the power of one woman standing unflinching, the growing unease of those sent to erase her. Meanwhile, on the other end of the call, her assistant's voice returned. "Legal team is monitoring. Media alerts drafted. All communications backed up to the cloud." Elena gave a single nod. Good, continue. The Rosenbergs didn't hear the details, but the crowd did. Phones captured every word, and speculation churned fast. She's not bluffing. She has a team. Wait, who is she really? The balance of the room shifted, subtle but irreversible. The humiliation that was supposed to isolate her had turned into a spotlight exposing them. The guards still lingered, caught between orders and instinct. The floor manager cleared his throat, but no sound followed. His authority had dissolved under the weight of one calm phone call. Elena lowered the phone back into her clutch. Her gaze swept the hall, measured, unwavering. And for the first time that evening, she spoke words meant for everyone to hear. You think you're removing me, but in truth, you're removing yourselves. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was charged, alive, the kind of silence that carried the promise of collapse. The reckoning had begun. The silence, after Elena's words, hung heavy, vibrating in the air like the low note of a cello. Every guest felt it. The Rosenbergs did too, though they tried to hide their unease behind sharp commands and raised brows. Then, quietly, came the crack in their facade. Near the edge of the hall, a young woman in a silver dress stepped forward. She looked barely 25, clutching her phone nervously, her voice shaking but audible. I saw her name. The crowd turned. The Rosenbergs stiffened. What did you say? The matriarch barked. The young woman swallowed hard, but found her courage. Her name, Elena Brooks. It was on the seating chart. I saw it this morning when I checked in. Gasps. A murmur spread like wildfire. The air snapped. You must be mistaken. She doesn't belong here. But the words were weak, defensive. Too late. Another voice joined in from the back. A man in a navy blazer. She's right. I saw it too. I thought it was strange a CEO was attending without an entourage, but her name was there. Phones tilted to capture the speakers. Live stream comments flooded in. They lied. Receipts coming out. This is discrimination live on camera. The guards froze mid-step. The floor manager's confidence cracked. Elena remained still, arms folded, her silence heavier than ever. She didn't acknowledge the witnesses, didn't need to. They had chosen to speak. The matriarch's voice shook with fury. Irrelevant. We control this event, not her. She has no authority here. But the crowd was no longer so certain. A guest in the front row muttered just loud enough. Then why is her name in the system? Another whispered, what if she really is who they say? The whispers spread. No longer whispers, questions piling, doubt growing. The Rosenbergs doubled down. The air pointed at Elena. Security! Remove her before this circus gets worse! But the guards hesitated. Their eyes flicked from Elena's calm face to the sea of raised phones recording every second. One wrong move and they wouldn't just be removing a guest, they'd be igniting a scandal. And then, from the side of the room, came a voice that carried weight. It wasn't a guest. It was a staff member, a junior event coordinator, badge still clipped to her blazer, stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her voice rang clear. She's telling the truth. Elena Brooks is registered as the primary partner for the Rosenberg acquisition deal. I verified it myself this afternoon. The room exploded. Guests gasped. Murmurs collided. Live stream comments shot upward in disbelief. The matriarch's face drained of color. The air shouted over the noise. You're out of line. You'll lose your job for this. But the staffer stood firm, planting her feet. Then so be it. But I won't lie for you. The words hit harder than the slap had. Because now it wasn't just Elena's silence against their arrogance. It was proof. It was witness. And the room, the very room the Rosenbergs thought they controlled, was beginning to turn. The words of the junior coordinator still echoed through the hall. I won't lie for you. It was like a match struck in a room soaked with gasoline. The Rosenbergs erupted. The matriarch's voice shook, not with fear but with rage. Enough of this nonsense. She's nothing but an opportunist. This event is ours. This deal is ours, and we decide who belongs. The eldest heir slammed his glass onto the podium, shards scattering across the marble. Security, remove them both, now. The guards shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the crowd. Phones were everywhere. Every angle of this confrontation was being captured, broadcast, dissected in real time. A guest near the back muttered into his live stream. They're panicking. Look at them. They're losing control. Still, Elena stood silent. Arms folded, her chin tilted just enough to command attention without saying a word. The matriarch pointed a trembling finger at her. This contract was never valid. Do you hear me? Fraud? She tricked her way into this room, gasps, then murmurs. But not everyone believed it anymore. From the center of the hall, a woman in pearls spoke up. If that's true, then why was her name on the seating chart? The question cut deeper than any insult. Guests turned toward the Rosenbergs, waiting for an answer. The air barked back. Charts can be forged. Names can be hacked. Do you think billion-dollar families don't get targeted? But his words lacked the conviction of authority. They sounded desperate. The junior coordinator stepped forward again, voice steady now. I checked her credentials personally. She didn't forge anything. She's here legally. She's here as a partner. The matriarch's face twisted. She spun on the young woman. You're finished. Fired. Do you understand me? You'll never work in this industry again. The staffer flinched, but didn't retreat. She lifted her chin, mirroring Elena's calm. Then fire me, but I won't erase her. Gasps surged again. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. A few guests clapped softly, almost afraid of their own hand. The Rosenbergs saw it, and it terrified them. The air roared, his composure cracking. You people don't understand. This isn't about her. This is about order. Without order, we lose everything. But the more he shouted, the smaller he looked, because order was already slipping. Phones buzzed with notifications. Live streams were exploding with viewers. Hashtags already trending. Number Galagate and number Elena Brooks. Guests whispered louder, some shaking their heads, others muttering, "This will ruin them." And still Elena hadn't raised her voice. Not once. She didn't need to. Because the Rosenbergs were doing it for her, exposing their own fear, their own bias, their own unraveling. Every insult, every command, every desperate gesture was another crack in the foundation they had built. And the crowd was no longer neutral. They were witnesses. And witnesses, once awakened, don't go back to silence. The hall buzzed like a hive on the edge of collapse. Phones flashed, guests whispered, guards lingered uncertain. And then, the Rosenbergs made their worst move yet. The matriarch seized the microphone from the podium, her voice amplified, booming across the marble chamber. Ladies and gentlemen, this imposter does not belong here. She is a fraud who tried to infiltrate our family business. Effective immediately, the billion-dollar contract she claims to represent is void. A whoosh fell. Every guest, every camera, every phone locked on Elena. The heir stepped forward, holding up a folder thick with papers. With theatrical arrogance, he tore it down the middle. Pages fluttered like white confetti across the marble floor. "This deal is over," he shouted. "There will be no partnership with her." Gasps ricocheted through the room. Someone whispered, "Did they just cancel a billion-dollar contract in front of everyone?" Another muttered, "This is insane." The guards moved again, emboldened by the spectacle. One reached for Elena's arm, his voice flat, rehearsed. "Ma'am, you need to leave with us now." The insult was complete. The humiliation, absolute. Tears shimmered in the eyes of the young coordinator who had defended her. Guests shifted uncomfortably, the weight of injustice pressing against their silence. The matriarch's voice crackled through the speakers once more. "Let this be a lesson. Some people will never belong in rooms like this." The words cut deeper than the slap had. They weren't just directed at Elena. They were meant for everyone watching, everyone recording, everyone who had ever been told the same thing in quieter rooms with no witnesses. The crowd convulsed. Some gasped, some shouted. A man in the back raised his voice. "This isn't right. You can't just erase someone like this." But the Rosenbergs ignored him. The heir smirked, satisfied. The matriarch adjusted her diamonds, certain she had crushed the defiance standing before her. And through it all, Elena Brooks remained silent. Her arms stayed folded. Her gaze never wavered. Her presence, though targeted, was unbroken. It was the image of a storm before it breaks. One guest whispered into his live stream, "This is it. They've destroyed her deal, her name, everything." Unless the word hung in the air. Because even in that moment of maximum humiliation, something about Elena's stillness told them it wasn't the end. She had let them reach their peak, let them tear paper, let them spit venom, let them declare her erased. Because the higher they climbed in arrogance, the further they would fall. And the fall was coming. The shredded papers still drifted across the marble like fallen snow. The Rosenbergs stood tall, convinced they had buried her. Guests shifted in their seats, restless, torn between outrage and fear. And then Elena moved, not rushed, not rattled, just a measured step forward. Her heels clicked against marble, echoing louder than the air's last shout. She reached calmly for her clutch, pulled out her phone, tapped once. Her voice was steady, carrying just enough for the hall to hear. Confirm activation. Phase 2. A pause. Then, clear through the speaker, her assistant's voice calm and professional. Confirmed, Miss Brooks. All legal records have been secured. The termination notice has been logged against the Rosenberg Group. Media partners have received the incident summary. Live distribution pending your go-ahead. The hall froze, gasps, whispers. Someone muttered, termination notice? Against the Rosenbergs? Another whispered, she's not bluffing. The air's smirk faltered. The matriarch's fingers tightened around the microphone. What are you talking about? She snapped. Elena didn't look at her. She addressed the room. You wanted this deal canceled. Consider it done, but you don't decide what happens next. The words cut through the silence like glass. Phones tilted higher. Guests leaned in. The matriarch barked, lies, empty threats. But even as she spoke, several guests' phones buzzed. Notifications lit up screens across the room. Headlines flashed real-time updates pushed from news outlets and financial trackers. Rosenberg deal collapses. Internal breach alleged. Brooks. Global Files termination against Rosenberg Group. The crowd gasped again, louder this time. It wasn't just drama anymore. It was fact. The air lunged toward Elena, face red. You have no authority to do this. Finally, Elena's eyes locked on his. Her voice was quiet, precise. I'm the majority stakeholder. Without me, your deal is dust, and every investor watching knows it. A ripple surged through the room. Some guests began clapping hesitant, then louder. Others recorded even closer, capturing every twitch of panic on the Rosenbergs' faces. The matriarch tried one last time. You'll regret this. You think you can humiliate us? Elena cut her off, her tone sharp enough to slice marble. Number, you humiliated yourselves. I just gave you the stage. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, alive, vibrating with a shift in power that everyone could feel. The guards stepped back. The floor manager lowered his eyes. And the Rosenbergs, once untouchable, suddenly looked very small under the weight of their own arrogance. Elena Brooks didn't need to shout. She had just flipped the room with a single phone call, and the reckoning had only begun. The gala hall was no longer buzzing. It was vibrating. Notifications chimed across the room, screens flashing with the collapse of a billion-dollar deal. Guests whispered, phones angled high, their eyes darting between Elena Brooks and the pale-faced Rosenberg. The matriarch clutched the microphone like it could still anchor her authority. Don't listen to her. She's lying. She's nothing. But no one looked at her anymore. All eyes were on Elena. She took another measured step forward, her heels echoing like gavel strikes. Her gaze swept across the room, not at the Rosenbergs, but at the witnesses, the guests, the staff, the world beyond those live streams. And then, for the first time that evening, she spoke her name. Elena Brooks, founder and CEO of Brooks Global Holdings, majority stakeholder of this acquisition. The words dropped like a stone into still water. Ripples of shock spread instantly. Gasps erupted. A woman in pearls clutched her necklace. A man in a tux whispered, "She owns it. She actually owns it." The junior coordinator who had defended her exhaled in relief, tears brimming. Livestream chats exploded in all caps. She's the owner. They tried to erase her in her own deal. Elena's voice cut through again, calm but sharper than the matriarch's scream. You called me a fraud. You called me an outsider. You tried to erase me in front of this room. But this contract, this deal, this future, it doesn't move without me. I am the deal. Applause broke out hesitant at first, then swelling. Some guests stood, clapping louder, defying the Rosenbergs' authority. Others kept filming, narrating for their viewers. She just revealed herself. She's the majority owner. The heir staggered forward, his face drained of color. Impossible. Our family built this empire. You're lying. Elena turned her gaze on him, steady and unflinching. You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake. The line hit like thunder. Guests erupted gasps, applause, even cheers. The live stream comments flooded. Drop the mic. Iconic. She didn't even raise her voice. The matriarch's hand trembled on the microphone. Her diamonds no longer looked like symbols of power. They looked like chains. She tried one last plea. This room belongs to us. Elena stepped closer, her voice a blade. Number, this room belongs to truth. And tonight, it just changed sides. The crowd roared, some clapping, some shouting in solidarity. The guards lowered their eyes, stepping back fully now. Even the floor manager slipped quietly into the background, no longer daring to stand against her. The Rosenbergs had tried to erase her. Instead, Elena Brooks had revealed herself as the one person they could not control. The hall wasn't just watching anymore. It was witnessing history. The revelation detonated in the hall like a silent bomb. Elena Brooks. Not a fraud, not an intruder. The CEO, the majority stakeholder, the very heart of the billion-dollar deal the Rosenbergs thought they controlled. The matriarch's grip on the microphone faltered. Her voice, once thunder, now cracked. You're lying, this can't be true. But the crowd no longer believed her. Guests leaned into one another, whispering urgently. She just confirmed it. Check your phone, look, it's in the filings. She's the one in charge. Screens lit up across the room as news bulletins poured in. Financial blogs, live tickers, push alerts. Brooks. Global confirms ownership stake. Rosenberg deal crumbles after Gala incident. The heir's face turned scarlet. His jaw clenched, fists trembling as though brute force could reclaim the power slipping through his fingers. This isn't over, he barked. But no one listened. The guards, once poised to remove Elena, took a step back. One even lowered his head, refusing to meet her eyes out of shame. The floor manager disappeared behind the curtains, unwilling to stand on the wrong side of history. The junior coordinator who had spoken up earlier stood taller now, her fear burned away by vindication. Tears gleamed on her cheeks, but her voice was steady. I told you, she belongs here. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in applause. Slow at first, then thunderous, hands clapping, voices cheering, phones recording the downfall of one dynasty and the rise of another. The matriarch tried to shout above it, her words dissolving into the noise. Stop this! We are the Rosenbergs. This is our legacy. But legacy meant nothing in that moment. Not when arrogance had been broadcast, not when lies had been shattered, not when truth stood calm in a black gown at the center of the storm. Elena's silence was over. Her words, when they came, were measured but final. Your legacy ends tonight, with your own actions, and every witness in this hall will remember it. The heir lunged forward as though to retake the microphone, but a guest blocked his path, an older man in a tailored suit who had been silent until now. Enough. We've seen enough, another guest joined, stepping between Elena and the family. Then another, and another. Within seconds, a circle had formed not of guards, but of guests, a barrier of witnesses, protecting the woman they now recognized as the rightful power in the room. The Rosenbergs had begun the night untouchable, their word law, their wealth unquestioned. Now they were cornered, stripped bare in their own hall, their names trending worldwide, not as symbols of respect, but as hashtags of disgrace. Elena Brooks didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because the room itself had chosen its side, and the family that once believed they held the world in their jeweled hands was collapsing in real time. The applause still thundered through the marble hall, shaking the chandeliers. Guests stood shoulder to shoulder, some cheering, others still recording, the glow of their screens catching every angle of the Rosenbergs' downfall. Elena Brooks stood at the center of it all, unshaken. When she finally raised her phone again, the hall quieted instantly. Her voice was calm, steady, absolute. Nora, patch in the boardroom. On the other end, her assistant didn't hesitate. Already live, everyone's listening. Gasps. Some guests lifted their phones higher, realizing they weren't just witnessing a gala anymore, they were watching history in real time, linked to corporate command centers across the globe. Elena's eyes swept across the Rosenbergs. Effective immediately, the Rosenberg family is stripped of all authority in this deal. Their access to Brooks Global Systems is revoked. Terminate their board privileges. Her assistant's voice came crisp, unwavering. Confirmed. Rosenberg credentials disabled. Contracts nullified. Notifications dispatched. A sharp ping rippled through the room as the heir's phones lit up with red error messages. Their access had died right there, in front of everyone. The eldest heir fumbled with his screen, disbelief twisting his features. No, this can't be happening. The matriarch's diamonds rattled as her hands trembled. She clutched the microphone, but her voice was no longer commanding. It was pleading. You can't do this. Not here. Not to us. Elena's gaze didn't waver. You did this to yourselves. A hush swept the hall. Then Elena delivered the final cut. Effective tonight, Brooks Global is severing all ties with Rosenberg Enterprises. Every contract, every partnership, every negotiation, canceled. You will find no shelter under my name, my company, or my network. Not now, not ever. The words landed like a gavel. Final, irrevocable. Guests gasped, some even cheered. Live stream comments exploded. She just erased them. This is how power speaks. They fired themselves. The Rosenbergs staggered, pale and broken. Their empire, once untouchable, had just been gutted in less than 5 minutes by the very woman they tried to erase. The young coordinator who had spoken up earlier wiped tears from her cheeks. She whispered, almost reverently, "Justice, real justice." The guards stepped aside completely now, no longer agents of removal but silent witnesses to power. Even they seemed relieved not to be tied to the family any longer. The matriarch tried one final time, her voice cracking. "You'll regret this. You'll be hated." But Elena's response was ice and steel. "Better to be hated for dignity than remembered for cruelty. Tonight, you chose your legacy." The hall erupted again, cheers, claps, even chants of her name. "Elena, Elena, Elena." She didn't bask in it. She didn't need to. Her eyes remained fixed on the family now crumbling before her. They had raised a hand against her, tried to erase her presence, torn paper as if they could tear away her worth. But now, their power was ash, scattered in the very hall where they had sought to humiliate her. Elena Brooks didn't just punish them, she ended them, and she did it without raising her voice. The hall was still shaking with applause. Guests stood, some clapping, some shouting her name, others stunned, silent by the collapse they had just witnessed. Phones everywhere captured the scene, live stream comments surging by the thousands per minute. But Elena Brooks didn't revel in it. She simply adjusted the cuff of her gown, exhaled once, and turned to face the Rosenbergs one final time. Her voice was calm, clear, cutting. "You tried to erase me in a room I own. You thought dignity could be torn like paper, but now you understand my presence was never yours to grant, and my absence will cost you everything." Gasps, murmurs, applause rising again. The words landed like iron, a sentence carved into stone. The matriarch sank into her chair, diamonds dull under the lights. The heirs stared at their dead phones, powerless, their empire dissolving in real time. Elena took one final look around the hall, at the chandeliers still trembling, at the guests who had found their voices, at the staff who had risked their jobs for truth. And then she turned, heels striking the marble like drumbeats. Every step toward the exit echoed with finality. Guests parted instinctively, making way for her. Some whispered her name, reverent, as though they were watching history itself walk past them. The young coordinator bowed her head slightly, tears in her eyes. Elena paused long enough to meet her gaze and offer a single nod, a silent promise that courage had not been wasted. At the door, Elena stopped. She didn't turn back, but her voice carried across the chamber one last time. "Remember this night. Respect isn't granted by wealth, it's earned by dignity, and dignity never leaves with the one who holds it." The room erupted cheers, claps, chants of her name surging like a wave. And then, without another word, Elena Brooks walked out of the Rosenberg Gala, leaving behind shattered contracts, broken arrogance, and a lesson that would echo far beyond those marble walls. The slap that was meant to erase her had instead rewritten everything.